You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Cade Mila Vulture, you son of a gun.
Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scarr, purveyor of injuries.
I'm Owen.
And I'm Dr. SavageMick, ER and trauma specialist. The trauma is usually psychic.
We're here today to discuss a question posed by a long-time listener and friend of our Discord, Mr. Miyagi-Yoda, who has suggested trouble looking for systems that have an alternative to what he refers to as sandpaper damage mechanics. Apparently, the time-honored tradition of having a bunch of numbers on your character sheet next to your name and alignment and rubbing them off constantly whenever a goblin pokes you, and then after 37 pokes, you fall over and have to start over. The part that's not working for our good friend at the moment, and we should probably bring up some alternatives that might suit what he's looking for better.
Did you ever have a character sheet that ran so long you had to reinforce the hitbox, the hit points part of it?
I feel like I did, like, way back in the day. Like, this would be in 3.5 type era, where you were. It was much like modern Fifth Ed. It was a system where you were gaining and losing hit points on a regular basis, and there was even a higher number of passive healing effects going around. So, I'm pretty sure there was at least some version of Barbarian that automatically got hit points back every turn or something. It was a wild time. Prestige classes, never again.
Picked a hell of a time to swear off prestige classes. I mean, if you had a long enough campaign ahead of you, probably best to put your character sheet on vellum or something hard-wearing, canvas maybe. So,
I have had to occasionally replace the character sheet because the hit point section was getting a bit rough.
Through.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mostly I think it was Age of Worms. It definitely happened with me. I was like, time for a fresh character sheet.
Well, that was a campaign where you were constantly taking ability damage too, because that was their big trick. You were like getting con drain, strength drain, probably some wisdom drain.
Okay, that's quite a lot. I am still up, for I am a Dustblade with a high intelligence, but I fear the ranger and the cleric are both drooling over in the corner. I'll have to win this fight myself.
But that is one of the things that hit point systems have sort of brought in is like alternative ways to weaken or otherwise inconvenience players. So monster special attacks was one thing, and they were relatively early on. We all heard of the various saver dies, and of course the level draining whites of classic D&D, which almost never were popular, and we'll probably come back to the enduring popularity of hit points at some point. But
okay, it's time for history lesson. Hida, why hit points?
It's a wargaming origin, right? You want something that's relatively quick to adjudicate if a guy is still functional and dead, and it's pretty good for handling a massive troops. When you've got maybe you're commanding 20 guys, you're like, okay, I want to see if I want them each to have some health value based on something, and maybe the better guy is more. I'm not sure exactly where it came from at a root level.
Well, I believe the root level was Gary Gax's original Chainmail war game, where the average trooper was basically, they were more like a weapon and a set of armor, and that was basically determined how good they were at killing other troops and how easy it was for other troops to kill them on like a D6 or 2D6 or whatever. That was the basis. And then when Dave Arneson used Chainmail for his experimental role-playing game in Blackmore, very quickly people were running into the complaint of, well, I don't want to just die to a single. We're meant to be investing in these characters. Surely, some way so we don't die to every single successful hit. And then, so the idea of hit points was a number of dice equals your level of hit points to mitigate this factor and also cause differences between people, because in the early game balance was not a thing they really considered, and it was considered beneficial to have one second level fighter had 12 hit points and another had 3, and this would cause them to play differently. But yeah, it just sort of iterated on these base premises. We went from, I am a single unit with chainmail and a pike, to I am a first level fighter. I have 3 hit points and like a 15 plus save, and it would just go on, and we're up to today where we're giving out, starting maximum dice hit points and trying desperately to compensate for first level characters being so weak. And then once you hit like level 6, you basically enough hit points to be like run over by a herd of rhinos and just sort of walk it off. As long as it's a cleric within 60 feet of you, you're fine.
Yeah, I mean that's in the sort of the D&D centric sphere, and there's plenty of 6-stat derived systems that basically all treat hit points the same way.
But more than that, I mean, if you go and start looking outside, they've become kind of lingua franca in a lot of RPG-based games where you just have hit points. And what the advantage of them is from a game design point of view is that people have a pool of points that you can deplete by attacking them. And it provides a sense of progress when you're fighting a bad guy that, okay, we're chipping him down though. And for the GM, it goes, well, at least I'm chipping him down a bit.
Yeah.
It feels that there's some immediate consequence to what's happening. The problem is when you take the teeth away from it. When you make getting it back too easy without making that part of the design. Like, one of the things is Pathfinder 2nd Edition assumes you go into every fight with full HP. And provides you out of combat healing in the form of medicine checks to get you back up. And in combat heals are emergency big effect spells that are used to heal somebody back up. That you usually, like, I'm a 5th level cleric. I have a bunch of heals in my healing font, and when I cast that heal, I'm going to heal you 3d8 plus 24 HP, and that's going to feel like a big deal.
Yeah.
And the game is designed around that. And the bad guys do enough damage to potentially knock you down during a fight, so it's fine. Other games defang it totally, where you're like, no, you've got tons of hit points, and bad guys do relatively little damage, and healing is fairly easy. And they don't become a threat then. And some people want something a bit different, because hit HP, from a game design point of view, it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
But from a replicating the real world point of view, it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. I say all the time people start complaining to me about meta currencies and RPGs, and I bring up, well, what about HP? And people go, HP, that's not a meta currency. It is a meta currency. It's a way to represent your ability, your health being slowly abraded, but not in a way that affects your ability to fight. Has anyone here ever gotten really hurt, lads? Because the way you're talking about it is none of you have ever really gotten hurt. Because getting hurt in real life abrades your ability to do stuff. No one is like, I'm grand.
That takes us to the other side of that coin, the non-negotiables, the condition, which kind of sits... When were conditions? I mean, conditions have been there forever. Like, we've got all your...
Wolfrup is probably the...
Paralyzed and death and... I don't know what other saves you used to get, but yeah, Wolfrup has... Lots of combat systems eventually end up with hit points and conditions.
It took a while for, like, I think it was actually, now I think what the originator was the Roll Master system. It was one of the first big attempts to make the realistic D&D, and that game is infamous for not only having charts for every weapon, but for every type of wound you can possibly take. And, It's never been super popular, but it's always been around. I'm pretty sure there's still some edition of Rollmaster going around, or some licensed RPG that is using it for some reason. Probably Harn.
I mean, Traveller, right back in the 70s, was doing, you took damage by losing physical stats, and as your physical stats degraded, you got worse at those related tests.
Yeah.
And
So it wasn't a specific, your arm has fallen off, or you're bleeding from your lung. It was a more visceral, your in-game stats have been reduced. And there was an immediate, it wasn't an explicit, this has done X to you in universe, but it was a very clear mechanical expression of it.
And there was the awkward part of that is having to recalculate skills based on the fact that your dex is now in the toilet because you've been shot in the leg a lot or shot in the arm. Where you got shot, that's up to you to narratively describe. But once you start losing physical stats, everything gets harder because it's like, okay, I used to be like 12 dex, I am now 3 dex. So now all my dex tests are at a massive penalty until I get healed up. It's elegant in one way. The difficulty is it involves quite a lot of death spiral, and there's very little quick healing in Traveller. So you're kind of going to be like, okay, we're now beat up, GM, and your GM is like, cool, let's continue the adventure. And players go, how about we don't? Because we need to go to hospital.
I want to get off this. So that those conditions and attribute loss and things like that is one of the sort of reflexes design-wise to go away from hit points, but of course it runs into those problems, death spirals, and then buckets of hit points, and regaining hit points too quickly makes hit points themselves not very interesting. Of course, if we just try and kind of stay in the median, then you get what is essentially a kind of a resource management game where the resource is healing from dead or from zero. So I've played in lots of games where the question is, are you on zero, or do how many hit points do you have? Have you any hit points or have you no hit points?
Yeah.
That is the decider in terms of, that's the heuristic for what will be done next regarding your health. There's no topping up, there's no sort of attempting to triage or anything. Like, if you're upright, you've got an action, therefore you can act and you're fine. Just keep at it. When you go to zero, then we'll throw some healing at you.
And
let's think for a second about Magic the Gathering, to throw a slightly different thing. Okay. Life in Magic the Gathering is fully a resource. And people, I've took so much damage. And I was like, yeah, but the only point of life that matters is the last one.
Yeah.
Until that, you're grand.
There are exceptions in weird cards or weird interactions, but for the most part, like, if you can calculate how many turns you have until your opponent kills you, you can plan around that, and that's part of the game.
Yeah, like someone puts out a 2/2, well, and nothing else happening. Well, that's a 10-turn clock. You know, I mean, that's it's a way to play a game, and it's a perfectly fine way to play the game. But some people don't want that. They want a different feel of danger. And you were asking about what's the advantage of doing kind of a more dangerous or a more, intense form of damage. And part of it is consequence. Hit points, when they're easy to heal, make getting into a fight, unless you've got a good chance of losing, pretty risk-free, which can enable some behavior that you may not want.
Yeah.
Like,
I think myself and Dave covered this in a recent episode where, you rarely hear about a Woofro party until they get to like really high levels, like actively looking for fights. You generally get one dwarf player playing a Slayer, and he'll get killed by a peasant with a rusty boat peg or something in session 2, and then he'll roll up a wizard and be glum about it for the rest of the campaign.
I'm nearly finished on the first book of Enemy Within. I'm playing in that campaign, and our first fight was so traumatic for the entire party. Apparently, in Woofro, it's possibly on fire and drowning at the same time. We just avoided every single hint of a fight. We had our beards tugged. We had sand kicked in our faces. We just were like, we're not fighting. We're cool. It's fine. We'll go away now. We're very sorry. It totally demoralized us. We didn't want to go near a fight. And we ended up spending most of our money on poultices and surgery and things like that. So yeah, it's a whole thing. But it's entertaining in its own way.
It's down to the type of game you want. I think, like most things, the cloth should be cut to suit the measure of the RPG system. I think hit points are a perfectly fine system, but they enable a certain playstyle. And that playstyle is, my HP is a resource that I spend tanking damage and taking damage, and it's okay until I'm in trouble. And even then, there's usually, we've had a think about it in the game, say, can anyone heal us if we go down? And that's a big thing. Like, for example, can you imagine playing an RPG with combat where you don't have any ability to heal?
Like, apart from natural healing, resting in the hospital, that kind of stuff, lots of chicken soup.
It would not suit the vast majority of games.
Yeah, and I think the main problems of the chance of death is high, character investment, etc. But often, I think one of the big problems is just unevenness. Like, if it's like one particular party member fell in the trap, got their legs broken, as on one hit point, and everyone else is completely fine. Now we're suddenly in this dichotomy of, well, it makes sense for one party member to heal, but the rest of the party members have got no incentive to stop and can continue the story. And that's a tension, I think, that a lot of groups just do not want to have. They do not want to have.
They do not want to have you're in much the same way that they don't want to kill a player off so the players will sit there waiting. They also do not want to injure a player so badly they can't take part in the rest of the...
Yeah, and now, again, the original game designs and something like Traveller or original D&D, it was assumed that there'd be enough hirelings or apprentices or fellow spaceship crew members that party member could take over an NPC temporarily in order to stay in the game, and then after the session they could worry about organizing healing or roll up a new character or what have you. But this assumption of the game designers did not survive contact with the steadily growing RPG market, where people wanted to play their character all the time, and therefore there was this constant soft pressure to make healing as achievable as possible, so that people would always get to play with the character they wanted to play.
Did you ever hear how Mike Pondsmith came up with basically Crash Team in Cyberpunk?
Because people needed a way to get the character out.
There was no cure light wounds.
Yeah.
And what would happen was a player would be dying, bleeding out in the gutter, and they wouldn't really have a way to help him. Or everyone was. And
I've got swords for arms. I'm not really sure I can apply a tourniquet.
One of his players was a door gunner from Vietnam, and they came up with the idea of Trauma Team together as basically like a medevac chopper that comes out of nowhere with a machine gun, shoots at all the bad guys, picks up the person, and evacs them out. And they came up with a way to do it, and you pay your insurance premium, and if you're in trouble, Trauma Team comes and gets you.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that was the
beautifully cyberpunk idea.
Yeah, Slade took it even further with LAD, where exactly the same thing happens. If your guy gets killed, literally killed in this case, basically a chopper with a drawer cutter shows up, shoots at the bad guys, picks up the body, whizzes him back, and resurrects him using an LAD process. There's a character in one of the recent ones, Arnold Nutter, who was one credit short of a resurrection. He dies in one of the books, and he was really popular. So they said, his account was one credit short. So they had to wait a year for interest enough to accrue to tick it over so they could bring him back. So it's never waited so long to bring somebody back. But apart from a tendency to say pigeon a lot, he seems perfectly fine.
Fine, yeah. He wasn't using all those neurons. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that love him or hate him, hit points are really, really hard to get away from. They're easy to understand. They're easy to implement. They can feed into... So, just thinking about this, we talked about it. as you said, gaining them, losing them. You can say so many things with them, like how deadly is this weapon? Well, it does this much damage. It takes this many hit points. How good is this armor? It'll protect you from taking, this much reduction in hit points. It feeds into a lot of different things. What I don't think I've seen any system do this. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't it be interesting if, say, we were talking about Wolfrip, where, like, yeah, Troll Slayers are probably the only people who really want to get in a fight. It's just a thing. But if different classes in games treated hit points differently, say you had to have a minimum of hit points to use certain abilities, or you in fact had to lose a certain amount of hit points before certain abilities, sort of Berserker Rage, things like that, kicked in. There might be something to play with there.
Good. I think some games have tried that. I know there are certain cast from hit point RPG systems out there. The old Advanced Fighting Fantasy system. Shout out to some of its big fans. I know our listeners. But I think it's the tracking on some of those things is difficult, and people don't like missing triggers and that kind of thing. But it's great for like a computer RPG because they'll automatically tell you, "Oh, you're 35% hit points. Your nerd death rage has kicked in," or what have you.
One of the things is other ways of doing it. You could look at health levels or a wound track of some sort where you have some stand-in for HP. And as you accumulate wounds, perhaps, or as you lose health, you go down a wound track where your abilities degrade. And you'll see that in Storyteller System, you'll see that in Alpha Vor, you'll see that in Deadlands, you'll see that to an extent in Savage Worlds, not to the same extent, but to an extent in Savage Worlds. And the difficulty with it often is the players hate the death spiral of it. They hate getting worse at doing stuff. No matter how realistic it is, it's not terribly realistic, but it's a bit realistic.
The main issue is the visual pressure, like
players
because the penalties tend to be universal. And for simplicity's sake, that means that not only is your options to keep fighting reduced, but so are your options for escaping. Yeah. So that the math and the tactical decisions out there they rarely feel good.
Erebancha Zero, a Japanese RPG, does something vaguely different. Your wound boxes are bonuses. And when you mark, you can mark the first wound box and you take so much damage. You can mark the second wound box and you get so much damage. And each time you do it, I guess it's like +1 to everything, +2 to everything. And then you can mark the +3 wound box if you want. And if you mark the +3 wound box, if at the end of the combat you're at 0, you die.
Oh, I like that.
And then there's the +4, I think, where if you mark it at the end of the combat, you die.
You will die, yes. Yeah. I will do this final amazing thing. That's amazing.
I think that's what because it's a Japanese RPG with a very particular setting, but that was their concept of its degree of commitment to a fight, effectively. Yeah. Where you will go, right, I'm willing to risk dying to win this fight because this is against my nemesis, or I just want to kill this person. I'm going to go to +4. Now, to make that matter, you actually have to have a very numerically tight game where bonuses are rare to come by and very potent when you get access to them to make it worth to give bite to it.
Can't be splashy sort of system.
So that's something I would definitely look at. This damage saves, which basically turns everything into a save against the damage, and my biggest problem with them is it's mostly used in Mutants and Masterminds was the big champion of them. My issue with them is you flub your first damage save, you feel like a mook. That's me out of the fight. Boom.
I mean, it'll work in certain comic book things where, like, the Green Lantern will fly in, try to take on Darkseid himself, and then fail his save against the backhand, fall over and get piled on by
Paradigms. Or Logan gets blasted through a building and smashes down to the thing, so you're out of the scene. It's fine, but again, you have to be players have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with losing. Hit points make losing very slow. That's one of the things about them, and gives you tons of opportunities to get out. Very few RPGs have the chutzpah to go, yeah, you played that wrong, your character's out of the fight, or your character's dead. Shouldn't have done it that way.
And part of the problem is often it's difficult to communicate. Was that a stupid risk to take? Like if it is a dice saving throw style situation where you gambled and you rolled a 1, like if you'd rolled a 5, you'd have just taken a minor wound and laughed it off, but you rolled a 1, so you fall over with your liver on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
Like, is that going to feel like, oh, you made a tactical error, or is it going to feel like, oh, you were unlucky?
It's one of those things, like, you need to actually have mechanics to let you replay combat in your game if you're going to do that, I think. Because, like any game, you can't make the consequences of failure or making a mistake too high. Because if you do, when someone makes a mistake, they suddenly feel like a chump, and then they've huge consequences, and it's tremendously feel bad. If you're going to lose, you should lose fast. And then you get to try again. Any game that does that, like, doesn't make you go, even the Souls-likes, they don't make you go, okay, replay the last 8 hours of content.
No.
If you're playing correctly, you go, I go back to the bonfire. You probably go back 20 minutes at worst. And unless you played badly, effectively, and you learn not to play badly. So the whole point is that you have to, if you do a system where you can just get one shot really easily, you have to put in mechanics to get out of it. Do any of you guys remember Conspiracy X?
Oh, yes.
Conspiracy X had effectively a wound boxes, and you got in trouble by basically taking damage, and that gave you penalties, and there's a chance the damage got worse or got better depending on how much damage there was. There was an opposed test. It was a little weird. And one of the things you had was you could just get shot. Someone shoots you with wound 4 gun, and you get hit twice in a combo round. 2 guys shoot you with big pistols, and you go, okay, they both tested up on me successfully, so that became splatter 4, and I have a track of 6 for splatter, so that's splatter 8, I'm dead. And then what you could do is you go, let me just Rhine test 6 cents, we're going to replay this combat. And basically, you make a psychic test to get a premonition that something bad is about to happen, and you replay a round of combat. And you can do something different. Like, for example,
choice,
you dive out
for some
the
reason,
window.
I feel compelled to die. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to step back outside this room because there's 2 guys with guns there. I got a premonition, which is bad. I'm going to step back out of it.
I've dodged this.
Yeah, and that's the...
I think that, and yes, it's messy in its own way, but I feel like, and I know I've beaten this drum before, but in the day and age of digital character sheets and a phone in every pocket, like, resetting a couple of rounds shouldn't be that big a deal. And arguably, if you build a system with that in mind, with the ability for people to kind of go, no, wait, that's not what happened, Prince of Persia style, then like there's, and again, as you said, test those premises, test those tactics. Give your players, give GMs a chance to replay loops of combat to see if they can come up with a better solution. There's computer games that play with it. Tactical Breach Wizards by the amazing Tom Francis is one that instantly springs to mind. Any lover of D&D and Rainbow Six would get a kick out of that one. Its entire premise is that you can continually test your moves to see what outcomes are going to occur. Okay, so it occurred to me that, like, one of the reasons you can't get away from hit points as a kind of meta currency is that tacking on anything else makes things very complicated and causes, and you're trying to model conditions, exhaustion, critical wounds, things like that. It strikes me you could do something very simple in the adventuring day and say you've got a maximum re-up of hit points after any given engagement. So your starting total might be 100, but if you go below 80 in the first encounter of the day, you can't get back over 80 for the next encounter. It's a neat way to model exhaustion. It's going to make you play a little more cautiously as you get a little more beaten up, without adding anything else. You don't have to track anything else except your maximum.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, just a thought. We're looking
it's certainly
for new ways to sandpaper things.
That's sort of what Fifth Ed tried that a little. It reduced the old negative level mechanics that people didn't like and replaced them with reductions to your max hit points, which was actually turned out to be a very bad way of thinking because now you have your max hit points and your current max hit points are your current hit points. And
wait, when? What? This isn't Fifth Ed, is it?
yeah, undead, like vampires will drain your max hit points.
I see. Okay, right. Okay, yeah, and of course they've tried the exhaustion system, but that, I mean, yeah, I think I'd pick one over the other. I wouldn't do both.
I mean, yeah, I do think that the idea of like moving the list of debilitating conditions into more direct mechanics, like putting it onto your character sheet in terms of your ability damage or your hit point maximums or saving throw limits or something like that. I think those are perfectly fine ways to do it. It's as long as you have, as I said, the correct bookkeeping mentality to run it. And as you know, if they do implement a full TT
tabletop
BTT, and it can have all the stuff, then by all means. I know Matt Colville's new RPG is being built with its own VTT in mind, and
looks like he's doing no hit rolls, isn't he? He just roll damage.
Basically, it's roll for effect.
Yeah, so he's gonna have hit points then, right?
It is hit points. Like I don't think he wants to get away with hit points. He just wants to have I don't know. I dropped off his.
It's going to sound great to players when you pitch it, and then when in combat, when they're constantly getting hit, automatically they're going to feel quite differently about it. I promise you. I promise you. So, other ways of doing it beyond HP. There are games where you basically take like effectively aspects. You put like a status effect on yourself or a descriptor on yourself, and then you can. That's one of the few ways you have to make injuries a positive, where you can tag them for a fate point. You go, oh, my broken leg makes this harder. I take a -2 to this test, and I might fail, but I get a fate point for free now, and I can have that and use it later on as meta currency.
You're in a meta currency trading sort of scam at this point. Yeah, it's fate,
or spend fate put on it to. Show up in court and get a bonus on your law roll.
Exactly. I'm going to tag this clear injury caused by the defendant. And that's good. It's fine. I think the problem is one of the things about this is a lot of RPG players are not outdoor people. They don't do a massive amount of stupid stuff which might get you really badly injured. So they may not have the same. There's a show called Shoresy. One of the things that shows up in it is they're hockey players, and they talk about, "Hey, look, are you hurt or are you injured?" Because they're different.
Yeah,
and
missing teeth isn't injured.
Yeah, hurt like you can be sore, you can be bruised up, you could be not 100%, which is true a lot of the times with professional athletes. They're often not 100%. Yeah. They've got a niggling injury, or they've got a long-term problem, or they've got something else, but they still play fine. And then there's injured, and injured is you can't play. You can't play fine.
Yeah, it's been on my mind. Niggling injuries, Blood Bowl mechanic. That stuff that carries over. Yeah, sports injuries are an interesting one to think about, because you're absolutely right. It almost never gets reflected in sort of the kind of fantasy role playing stuff we're talking about. But it is a kind of it's an interesting one to think about. Like, last dungeon didn't go so well. What are you carrying over with you? I suppose there's an element of what is the audience. What are the players willing to suffer? Where's the fun pain here? Where's the pain?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. Like you'll often see like a Wolfrup character with like he's got like a hook for a hand and he's a constant limp, but because he's
Ask me how I got these scars.
Yeah. But like you'll so because that shows that he's survived so much, and he may have run out of fate points anymore, but he's got XP, so he compensates with chutzpah and the ability to roll threes out of the 100. And yeah, you'll see certain games sort of encourage this bear your scars mechanic because they've managed to get their players into that kind of mindset where like you are in medieval life simulator, and when a real person takes this kind of crippling energy, they make changes to their life and their approach to doing things, and they soldier on. But that doesn't happen as much in what I might call high fantasy games, where I mean, no, how much psychology about the importance of completeness of the body. We could get into deep psychology and even get into worrying psychology if we really wanted to.
You could require a scar before you level up.
And not
there are games to do that.
Yeah.
Not just fantasy either. I mean, take a look at things like Lancer Eclipse Phase. Like, death is not the end. Hit points and critical injuries are like, well, I'll toss this sleeve and clone up something fresh. Although maybe I'll keep those scars. They're a neat memento of that time I got 0G'd hard.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. It's like I don't want to anger all the Lancer fans by saying that it's on the same vibe as Fifth Editor, I think, but it is sort of it is sort of on a similar thing of like you are crafting your character the way you want them. You're not only crafting the appearance and skills of your character, you're also like partly crafting their narrative. Like you are considered to be the player is considered to be the final arbiter of like what happens to the character. Like the dice may have some say, but like ultimately it's a player who decides like, well, this is not the story I want to tell. And that's absolutely fine if that's the wavelength you work on, but it does mean certain things about how consequences have to be processed in that thing. And I don't think it's like that's a universal. Universal thought. I don't think the legions of new Fifth Ed players or whatever we're calling them now, I don't think they necessarily 100% subscribe to that way of thought. I just think enough of them like default to that it makes it harder for them to accept in RPG that have a different level of consequences, and where maybe losing sucks as much as it should suck.
Yeah. By the way, we call them players, you horrible gatekeeper.
Sorry.
Nah, you're all right. Look, let's take a look at Miyagi Yoda's alternatives here. Gear dice as HP.
So, like
when you take the damage,
yeah, you're rolling your dice to sort of cancel out the damage that you're taking, but as you roll ones or twos, like the item degradation dice of the OSR, that reduces your hit points. So it gives the effect of I have higher level, that means I can soak more damage, but also brings in that as I go through the day, my ability to soak damage is going down fast.
It's interesting. It's certainly, I don't think I've seen it done anywhere, and it's sort of, I can see. Yeah, I like the kind of. I'm a firm believer in the grinder. I'm a firm believer in making players go all the way out to the end of their tether, to kind of to use up everything they've got, and then reset. So there's something to that. Brindlewood Bay, they mention, has HP, but each level triggers a narrative prompt instead of physical degradation. By the time you reach the end, your character is unplayable. Certainly, I think Blades in the Dark plays with a similar idea. You're you can only fill in those boxes once, and once you've got them all, once that's it. Once you run out your track, that's it. So have we come up? I don't think we've come up with any startling alternatives, but I suspect there might not be any. Unless
it's a difficult one, because you have to come up with something that has basically better functionality than HP. And it's really easy to be unexamined about and throw HP in. Because it does so much work for you. You don't have to think about, okay, so how do weapons do damage? How do I do all this stuff? How do I create attention for the GM and the players where there's a risk? Oh God, this is a lot of extra work.
And
back to HP.
yeah, the part of the easiness is like, because everyone knows hit points after 40 years of video games, they because they're this lingua franca at this point, you don't need to negotiate them as more. Whereas with another alternative, more simulationist wound system, you have those. The three of us were fine, but John is missing his leg, and Mary's blind. So sort of the thing that makes sense in story would be for us to leave them behind in hospital and continue on, but that kind of would suck for them.
That's okay. Blind Mary developed blind fighting, and she's the deadliest woman in a dark room.
I mean, those are options depending on the genre, and I think that's part of the issue. Is that, like, at a certain point, if you're dealing with how damage works, you're also dealing with how losing or not winning completely works in your game, and that's a discussion not every RPG group is equipped to thing, and if you have certain mechanics, which pushed a certain way, you can get unintended consequences. I keep thinking of the the shotgun ninjas of a Call of Cthulhu game, where everything is an ambush where you tracked all the cultists out of the room and then shoot them in the back with shotguns, because that's the only way to avoid taking any damage at all. And is that necessarily the way that you want fighting to happen? Or
it's a feature, I think, of almost any sort of hit point system that you use. It will shape the way the players approach encounters, and sometimes at the detriment of the fantasy. It won't make sense for a bunch of scholars to treat this like they're tier 1 operators about to swat down a room. But that's the way they'll approach it if the system makes that the best thing to do, and they've played long enough to learn that. It might not be the most heroic fantasy thing to go, right, you go stand in front of that dragon until you drop dead, and then we'll heal you. But that is the way that modern D&D kind of works, is that kind of spring jack heal, I think I've heard it referred to, or springboard healing. Like, the only thing that matters is, do you have a hit point or not?
Is pogo stick healing, maybe?
It could be something like that. So you bounce back up again. It's like the Weeble Wobble Man. Here's a radical idea, and I'm sure Gygax did it or recommended it. Maybe you don't know how many hit points you've got.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's information that the GM has, but you don't. So
that certainly would cause a different way of playing. I would think.
You could have a rough idea, but at any given moment, you're not sure. It is not revealed to you exactly how much damage you've taken so far, except narratively, or by sort of judging that. Well, I think it's hitting this hard. You might. So I suppose the thing to do there is have a bag of goblins where you're fairly certain what the hit point range is. See how quickly they die to the enemy, and then calculate.
Here's your problem with that one. It's a lot of extra work for the GM, because they have to track everyone's hit points now. They can't just take 5 damage. Okay, let's move on. Oh, you have to do it. Oh, why have I made so much extra work for myself?
It's an interesting idea, isn't it?
We need more player work, not more GM work.
I think I'd be willing to do it if it would terrify players. I genuinely scare them. Oh no. And again, the black box can work both ways. I mean, you can. It's not so apparent that exactly this means exactly that in terms of when I die. Anyway, just a thought. We should probably wrap this one up.
Yeah. Well, I think we're unfortunately we're going to once again go with the it depends on what type of game you're planning to run, and that is the correct but not necessarily the most useful answer, because a lot of people want to run the game they're already running, but in a slightly different way. And because death and dying and taking damage is such an integral part of traumatic role playing, as we call it. It's difficult to change one or two things and suddenly have a new experience pop out of it. An awful lot of the thing is just like the hard work of trying something and playtesting and seeing what it does. You have to not only see what it does in terms of numbers and fight balance and all of this, you have to see how it makes people play. And that's a long process of going to conventions, exposing the different rules to a variety of different gamers, seeing what they do. Does it work differently in a one shot versus a long campaign? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, and even a lot of game designers don't get the chance to do it, even if they wanted to.
I think Wolfrup's critical hits that can occur randomly, or when you run out of HP, kind of simulates a little bit of the danger of combat and puts a little more reluctance on it. That's a good thing, because I think you want combat to feel risky. And when it doesn't feel risky, I don't think it's very good.
Fair, but we are now on a 5-book pacifist run.
Absolutely.
Just saying. Let's see.
I'm going to tell you right now, there's mandatory combats in that campaign. It's one of the stiff critiques of it.
Well, we might bleed a little, but think of the fun we'll have along the way. Okay. Right, listen, we want your most radical ideas. Join us on our Discord, which is our most radical forum. We have a Discord. Check the show notes for a link. And if you can't get onto the Discord for whatever reason, just do let us know. Find us in the comments section of our YouTube or something, or wherever you listen to this podcast.
We are still on Twitter. It's just that Elon Musk broke everything, so we don't get to.
Nothing works anymore. I don't know what an API. I used not to know what a tracker mortgage is. Now I don't know what an API is. So time marches on. Yes, but until the grave takes us, hopefully we'll die in our beds full of hit points. But until then, this party's over. Thank you for listening to The Adventure Party. Join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventureparty.net. The Adventure Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.